So as you're all mentioned, I am one of the associate directors on the advising and programming team. I also oversee Barnard Connect, which is our mentoring platform for students and alumni. And I also oversee mentors and residents, which the goal is very similar to Career Insights in the sense of students get to learn from alumni in their industry or graduate program, depending on what you're interested in. And I'm also an alum of the college. I graduated in 2013 and I've been here now for over 6 years. So I'm excited. Pre-law advising I've been doing now for 2 to 3 years. And I created the pre-law toolkit, which is a great first stop for pre-law advising. So feel free to reach out to me after this if you're interested in taking a look at that. But I'm really excited to get to know all of our panelists today and get to hear different perspectives from various job functions within public interest law. So before we get started on the questions, let's just have each of our panelists introduce themselves by going over what exactly you do and what was the process that you took to get to where you are now. So let's just start with Felice.
Hello, everybody. I'm Felice. I was Felice Bioris at Barnard. I graduated in 2002, and I was a comparative literature major. I love Barnard. I'm so happy to be here. I think that all of the programs they do is so great, and I do feel very connected to Barnard because I feel as if it made me a very strong advocate. If you asked me if I was interested in pre-law my first year, I was not. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I did take advantage of several opportunities for internships. I went on this trip with the Carnegie Mellon Foundation. I was really interested in environmental science. They asked me to, but then when we came and I interviewed for it, they said, we really would love to have you on the trip, but can you do a journal? They didn't even want a science experiment from me. So I guess I've always been a writer. That's what I did. I cataloged the trip. After Barnard, I was trying to decide what I wanted to do, and I had a job offer from Addison Wesley Longman Publishing. And then I also was thinking about law school, and I had gotten a scholarship to St. John's. And at the time I had some other, schools that I was thinking about, but someone said to stay with the New York school because at the time it was only the New York bar. So that's what I chose to do. I went to St. John's, and again, there I participated in all sorts of internships to decide which law I liked. I did mock trial, and I have a strong affinity for criminal law. And I've been a criminal defense attorney since 2006. Even while I was at St. John's, I worked at the Queens Public Defender. While I was there, I was one of the first people they were able to hire right out of law school. So everybody above me had at least 10 years experience. So I got a lot of experience in the courtroom. And then I moved out to Long Island, where I live in the East End, out in Southampton. And I was commuting for a while, but then I had children. And I decided to try Suffolk Legal Aid out, which is a public, also, criminal defense, public defense agency. And I do love it here. But I ended up in the Appeals Bureau, again, not expecting to be in the Appeals Bureau, but I loved it. I read trials every day. I'm always reading, I write. And now I'm the chair of the Appeals Bureau out here at Legal Aid.
Great, thank you so much. Maddie, do you want to go next? Oh, I think you're on mute.
The phrase of the year.
I know, right? So true.
I apologize.
Don't worry.
I graduated from Barnard way back in 1985. Grew up in New York City, stayed for college, came down to DC, where I am now, although I'm in Arlington, Virginia, just outside of DC, to go to Georgetown for law school, and have spent my entire career here. Started out at the Department of Transportation in their honors attorney program. From there, went to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, one of what are called the modal administrations at DOT. Then went to the American Public Transit Association, a private nonprofit representing public transit systems. Did a stay in actual private practice representing public transit clients, And then did a real pivot for a variety of reasons. Spent 12 years at the Legal Services Corporation, in-house counsel there. And Legal Services Corporation is the major fund. It's a private nonprofit, but it gets money directly from Congress and funds civil legal aid as opposed to criminal legal aid. And then for the last 9+ years, I have been in-house counsel at the National Academy of Sciences here in Washington, D.C. If there was a single thread through my legal career, it's been that I have specialized in being a generalist. Being in-house counsel, depending on the time of day and the day of the week, I could be a contracts attorney, an intellectual property attorney, a real estate attorney, a tax attorney, a labor and employment attorney, a benefits attorney. And perhaps that speaks to my lack of attention span or something. I'm not quite sure, but that is always very much suited me, being able to do a little bit of everything. And each place I've worked, in addition to doing kind of corporate in-house, just the in-house legal work, there has been some dabbling in different extents of the subject matter of the organizations that I work for. They're always very much mission driven about wanting to promote the missions and believe in the missions of the organizations that I have worked for. And it may not, doing the legal work behind may not always be the most exciting thing, but it's a really important part of helping the organization fulfill its mission. And that's my elevator pitch on who I am.
Amazing. Thank you. Shira?
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's so nice to be here. I'm Shira Wasatsky. I'm currently an immigrants' rights law fellow at the American Civil Liberties Union of New Jersey, or the ACLU of New Jersey. My path was a little bit of a windy one. I'd say my public interest kind of was sparked while at Barnard. I'm an 09 graduate, and I volunteered as a counselor and advocate with the Rape Crisis Anti-Violence Support Center. And I was like, okay, I did other internships and volunteer things, and I worked with a lot of social workers, and I was like, this is what I'm gonna do. I started a master's degree in social work at Columbia and realized pretty quickly that social work is really important, but I'm happier as an advocate, and that law was a better path for me. And so I actually left the program, looked for a career in law, worked for 4 years at the Legal Aid Society's Civil Practices Law Reform Unit. So civil rights advocacy. I supported civil rights advocacy as a paralegal, doing administrative advocacy on my own, supporting class action litigation and some policy work. And after 4 years, I realized if I wanted to grow, it was time for law school. I did a lot of fun things in law school. And when I got to the end, after about a decade of client-facing experience, I wanted to learn how to be the best lawyer that I could be. And I thought that meant working with and for a judge. And so I did 3 what's called judicial clerkships, or lawyers who work directly with a judge and help them with research and writing, help them in court, help them draft opinions. I first clerked for a justice on the Supreme Court of New Jersey, which is the highest appellate court in New Jersey. I did the foreign law clerkship program with the Supreme Court of Israel, so advising one of the justices on that court, primarily on constitutional law issues, international law, international human rights law. And then I came back to New York and clerked with a federal judge in Brooklyn. At the end of that, it was a wonderful 3+ years of doing it. And I was really ready to get back into kind of advocacy and working directly with clients. And that's how I ended up in my current fellowship. So working with the immigrants' rights folks at ACLU-NJ, we do litigation and we support policy work on behalf of immigrant communities. And so my work kind of can extend with respect to litigation, from direct services around conditions of confinement for immigrants who are in detention, to defending the civil rights of people who are protesting the government and doing First Amendment defense work. And then on our policy end, again, we kind of look at everything from confinement to working on access to healthcare, whatever runs the gamut on behalf of immigrant communities. So that's what I'm halfway through that fellowship right now.
Amazing. Lauren?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Nussbaum. I graduated Barnard in 2005, and I live in Maryland outside DC, and I work for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. I'm an attorney in their Office of General Counsel in their Public Health Division, which means I advise on HHS's public health programs. I also had a very long, windy road to get here. When I was at Barnard, I majored in Spanish and I did the teaching certification program. So when I was at school, I would have been nowhere near this panel. I had no idea I wanted to be a lawyer. So kudos to you, to you all for doing what you want to do. What did I do? After I graduated college, I had studied abroad, my junior year abroad in Cuba and Bolivia. And after I graduated Barnard, I went back to Bolivia for a year and taught English and volunteered for an NGO that worked on women's rights. And that prompted me to get a master's in Latin American studies, where my concentration was on gender and public health. So I've always had kind of a health focus, but it took me a while to figure out how to use that. I thought about continuing on to get my PhD and becoming an academic, but I really felt like I wanted to do more and not just study more. And so I moved to DC and worked in the policy advocacy space on public health, HIV, AIDS, housing, those kinds of issues. And in DC, it felt like anybody who was doing the kind of jobs that I wanted to do, they all had a law degree. And so I went to American University, to their law school here in DC. And I thought I was going to do policy advocacy, but then I don't even know. Towards the end of my law school, I figured I didn't want to do that. And I don't know if that was because of 2010 and the Tea Party, and then just Congress did nothing. And I got really frustrated by that, or just in being in law school, it's really geared toward litigation. And it feels like that's the only thing you can do. So I also clerked, and I loved it. I had 2 clerkships. I clerked for 4 years for a state judge and a federal judge. And that really sets you up well for litigation. So I went to a plaintiff side class action firm. So I work mostly on employment discrimination cases and whistleblower cases. And I loved it. And I loved fighting the good fight, but I have 2 kids under 6, and litigation is really hard, not just in terms of the time it takes, but it's also really stressful. And I realized I like to avoid conflict just as a personal trait. And so being a litigator just felt emotionally stressful and draining for me. And so I decided, I talked to a lot of people and tried to figure out, I love being a lawyer, but tried to figure out how best I could use my skills in a way that made me happier. And so I moved to the advice role, which basically I see it as, and it fits because I advise public health programs, but I see it as a prevention role of, I want to prevent conflict. I want to prevent litigation. I want to help government programs. I want to help the people that run those programs figure out how to accomplish their goals without getting sued, without violating any laws, but help them figure out how to exercise their authority, what authority they have. And just, it feels like a very strategic, creative role. And I'm really enjoying it. And it feels very exciting to do it now in the midst of the pandemic. And I made my switch. I started about a year ago. So I've never met my coworkers. I've never been in my office. It's been crazy, but I'm really happy to be where I am now.
Great. So that is actually a very good segue to my next question, which is about the key skills and competencies that you feel are really essential to your field. And really going off of that, how do you feel that COVID has impacted or maybe incorporated new skills that you think would be really important for students that are going to be possibly interning and working full time? So let's circle back to Lauren and then we'll go back in reverse order.
So first, skills, right?
Yeah, and then if there are any additional skills, and I think that's really relevant, that you feel like maybe you've adapted or wanted to suggest to students based on, you know, COVID and what's been going on, that you think would also be important.
Okay. I think critical thinking skills are really important. I think writing skills are really important. And I think that's probably true across, there's such a variety of law jobs and ways to be a lawyer. But I think that's the thread between it. I also think social skills and diplomatic skills, especially if you're working with clients. Sometimes you have to give news that people don't want to hear. Sometimes you have to present options where there are no good options, and just have it like build ways to build trust, to empower your clients, to be a trusted resource for them, to be a sounding board. All of those take a lot of social skills. And I say that as I'm an introvert, and I was happy being a clerk and sitting in front of my computer all day, and not really having to talk to anyone. So it's something that it might not, even if it doesn't come naturally to you, it's something that can actually be really fulfilling when it does. And then in terms of the pandemic, I feel like it's very easy to be, well, the kind of lawyer that I am. I feel like it's very easy to be a lawyer, my kind of lawyer in a pandemic, a government lawyer, because all I do is give advice and answer questions. And I can do that over the phone. I can do that by email. I can do that by Zoom. I know that's not true, especially I'm sure for, you know, the criminal defense attorneys and people that have to be in court. I'm sure that's much more difficult, but by not litigating anymore, I feel very close to my clients, which are the people that run certain government programs. And we talk all the time, whether it's by phone, email, or video call. I don't feel like it's disrupted the work that we have to do at all. But I think that that could be unique to the kind of lawyer that I am.
Shira?
Thanks. I think I would echo most everything that Lauren said. I think communication's a really big one. The ability to communicate with clients, with the court, with judges, with opposing counsel, kind of working on those skills, knowing how to hit the right note. I'd say if you're interested in working kind of with clients or high impact or folks who need things, a lot of empathy is required too, and kind of being able to put yourself in other people's shoes and to the best that you can understand where folks are coming from. I think, at least for what I do, flexibility and resilience, I think that's always needed. I think if you're doing public interest work, like you're going to lose a lot if you're advocating on behalf of clients. I think we've lost almost everything that, I think the question isn't always necessarily whether you win or lose in court, but it's how you're moving it forward and whether you showed up with a person who's next to you, and kind of being able to reframe that for yourself and being resilient when you might not like be able to get check marks in kind of a traditional way is helpful. And I agree on the research and writing skills. I also would say, do not worry about that right now as an undergrad. So much of law school is focused on that, and it's a completely different way to research, write, and think, and you'll build those skills as you continue to build your education.
I remember to unmute myself this time. The thing that I will echo everything that's come before, what I'll say, especially since I've spent nearly my entire career being in-house, where my client technically, legally is the corporation, the entity, the organization, but obviously you express that through dealing with other people. Things that have been particularly useful skills over my career were an ability to think about what the interest of the people you're talking to is. What do they want? What are they trying to do with the organization? Where are they trying to take the organization? And to be able to think creatively about the best way to do that in a way that manages legal risk, make sure it's fully compliant with whatever regulations or laws that you have to comply with, and manages risk well, but make sure your clients know that you are trying to get to the same place as they are. I think that's been a very useful skill. Another one is being able to be simultaneously big picture oriented and detail oriented. I think many people are naturally one or the other. I am naturally a big picture person, but being a lawyer has forced me to be a detail oriented person. And I am 30 plus years into my legal career. I am never failed to be surprised at how often I'm the person who's keeping track of the details. I often think, this is your program, why aren't you keeping track of your details? But apparently that's not the way life works. So if that's how part of the way I can contribute is by being the person who keeps track of the details, well, then so be it. An early piece of career advice that I was given was also, if you have an opportunity like this to do public speaking, you should. Translating legal, it's really easy for lawyers to talk to each other. Super easy for lawyers to talk to each other. Lawyers talking to non-lawyers can be a challenge for both parties, and learning how to translate legal concepts and legal information with a lot of nuance, because oftentimes it's the devil's in the details, it's all in the nuance, to people who are not lawyers. That is a learned skill, and one, if you master it early on, will be really helpful in any legal career, public interest or not.
Everybody has great advice. As far as public speaking, I actually was, I volunteered at church as a lector, which really helps with the public speaking. So if you can make more time to, it wasn't just for that, of course, but it was a bonus. It helps a lot because you're going to find yourself in situations where often no one's on your side and you want to stay composed. You're not going to know anybody. It's good to be used to speaking. I represent a lot of people who are very, have gone through very tough times. They're indigent. They don't trust the system. So one thing, I don't take anything personally. You just have to be ready and willing to put up with it. It can be very discouraging. There aren't many wins, as Shira said. But I consider it a win to put my best foot forward, argue the best issues, and give the people who are incarcerated or convicted of crimes the best fight, the best defense possible. And I used to do trials, and since I've seen trials that I've done, 3 years later, someone got out after an appeal, not ones I've done, but everything counts. And some of those were records that I had made in the courtroom that someone else used, right? And even the appeals I'm doing can sometimes be heard in federal court. So it's a very long process, and you just have to try not to be discouraged. Time management is very important. Now that I'm in appeals, I can try to show you guys just stacks of transcripts. This is what my table's covered in right now. And we're still not back completely because we don't have to be in the courtroom every day. So I have my transcripts, I go in, I get mail sometimes, but most of the time I'm here, and because we've still had some issues, because unfortunately, and I'll lead that into the COVID question, my office actually was one of the first mass COVID writs that we filed for this, and then the city sort of backed on, but we had the first hearings because a lot of the inmates weren't receiving care, right? So we had filed all these writs of habeas corpus, which didn't really work because it's like getting the body out, technically, that's what it means, right? So you're filing papers to try to get someone out of jail, and we were trying to argue that their sentence was now unconstitutional because no one had expected this mass pandemic. And I'm sure you guys had all seen at some point in the papers talking about the conditions of the jail. The jails were in awful conditions. So we've gotten a lot of extra work because of that. I had to fight to get someone brought to a hospital to get a biopsy, right? Because they weren't taking people to the hospital because they were of COVID. So a lot of the inmates suffered, and it wasn't their fault. It was, and the jails were, some of the jails were trying as best as they could. No knew what to do, right? That's how that affected our practice. But as far as my work, I'm still able to do it anywhere. Time management is very important. You have to be able to work independently. You have to be willing to withstand criticism, and you're all going to get judges sometimes that'll just be either they think they're teaching you or they're mean because they're mean people, and they're not mean at home. They come to work and they're mean in the courtroom. You can't take it personally, but you have to stay composed. So like one of my supervisors once said to me, don't ever let them see you cry. And she was a little nuts, but she was right. You want to try and stay composed. And it was a shock when I first had people get put in, when you're trying your hardest to keep someone out of jail and they get thrown in right there with no warning. But that's, you want to try to stay composed. Don't realize that it's not something that you should be taking personally when things happen. You're doing your best job for your clients, and there aren't really any losses in my field as long as you're working hard, because the system is a very rough system.
Great, thank you guys. So now moving on to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So how do you feel DEI plays out in terms of challenges, but also opportunities provided at your organization or just in your industry in general? Felice, do you want to start?
So we do have a diversity director who was hired a couple of years ago, and as an organization, we've taken great strides to try and improve the ability to hire and retain diverse staff. So that's what that means. And I don't know if that would also involve, we've had trainings because of the mass cultural differences and backgrounds that our clients have, so that all of us understand and try to sort of be able to understand what's happening in the world and how it affects everybody's mental and emotional backgrounds. But we do have a director now that provides these trainings, and we try and retain a diverse staff.
Maddie?
So one of the things that the National Academy of Sciences does, I guess I didn't tell anybody what we do. So we are a private nonprofit organization that was created by an act of Congress in 1863. We were born during the Civil War. And among other things, we provide advice and information to the government and the public on pretty much any issue of sciences, technology, engineering, and medicine. And our science is then hopefully used by policymakers to engage in evidence-based policymaking. So we have a division of behavioral and social sciences and education, DBAS. We have a lot of acronyms. We have a policy and global affairs division, a health and medicine division, and a lot of our organization, the program folks, have been looking at DE&I issues, particularly in STEM and in STEM careers. Plus, the institution recently hired a new chief diversity, equity, and inclusion officer and a workforce diversity, equity, and inclusion officer. And I've been working with both of those people on kind of like the legal back end of some of the corporate initiatives, whether it's funding for a particular project, or we're engaging in workplace initiatives now to try to improve our own DE&I. I think we have a diverse workforce, but we can also do better. And I think the institution is looking to do that. And so my role, of course, is legal support to get the institution where it wants to be. So this is something that's a hot topic where I am, as pretty much almost everywhere these days.
Shira?
Thanks. I really appreciate this question, and it would feel weird to start answering it without just acknowledging some things. Like we have a real problem with diversity around race, sometimes diversity around gender when you look at higher levels of the legal practice, diversity around all markers in the legal profession generally, and within, I think, public interest organizations and institutions as well. I remember when I was in law school, I went to Cardozo. I sat on our diversity and inclusion committee as a student representative focused on disability access. I'm a person with multiple chronic illnesses and identify that way. And I remember hearing the statistic that only 3% of our student body was Black, which was shocking to me. And I see that reflected in the spaces that I've worked in. So I think we have a real problem, and I think we have a real, a long way to go. That being said, I would also say at the same time, being at the ACLU of New Jersey, I feel like even in the short time I've been there, we've made strides and we're having open and honest conversations, which is a good place to start. Just a few months ago, we started a strategic planning process, which includes a focus on internal culture and racial justice, where everyone's voices are included. All members and levels of the staff are part of those conversations. There have been steps to de-bias hiring. I know when I was interviewed, I was asked explicitly around kind of what I see as issues with diversity and race in the profession and steps that I would take to address that. And I also would acknowledge that there's a huge emphasis on kind of education and educational attainment in our profession, where we know that a lot of times that's code for race, that's code for class, that's code for a lot of things. And so part of kind of what ACLU-NJ has taken steps to do is to name abilities, name requirements in a way that isn't naming education, to try to kind of decode and make that process more open. We have competitive, for our state, sort of, and for public interest, sort of competitive salaries in New Jersey. It's hard to be a public interest lawyer sometimes, but they're also tied to years out of law school and not necessarily tied to kind of other markers of achievement that can also be coded in different ways. And I'd say that there's been a huge kind of push on conversation about inclusion, training on microaggression, and make sure that we're all being held accountable to each other. And the other thing that I'm so grateful for is that there's a lot of opportunities for more junior folks as there are hiring and onboarding a more diverse staff to have substantive experiences. And so I think that's great. And I know this isn't a direct answer to your question, but I think generally, just to add, with public interest work, I'm appreciative of kind of the centering of the communities that we serve in the organization where I work, where we're at least in conversation with the folks who are most impacted by our work and hearing from them on how to like what our policy initiatives should look like, and hearing their voice in our strategic planning and figuring out what issues to take on.
This is such a great question, and I'm so glad you asked it, and I'm having such a hard time answering. And I think it's because I've moved in lots of different spaces. And I'll just describe them. My law school is like Barnard. It's one of the most diverse law schools. I think a lot of that has to do with who leads it. For a long time, our dean was a Latino man. They just appointed an African-American dean. And I think we just do really great on diversity, and it's a really progressive place. And I feel like all the right conversations were had. It was real. There was a real commitment. It was a great space. And then I moved into clerking, and that can be a very traditional space. And by I mean traditional in a lot of, I don't know what I mean by traditional. It can be a conservative space, and I don't mean conservative like liberal or conservative, but just a traditional conservative. There's a lot of decorum, there's a lot of formality. And I clerked for two really great judges, but there was not much diversity in my first clerkship, and then there was a lot in my second clerkship. And I think part of that was my judge is an African-American man who grew up in rural Pennsylvania, was involved in the criminal justice system as I think the juvenile justice system. He's an inspiration. He's amazing, but he also went to my law school, and he was just not into the elitism, not into, you know, the names of like, you know, the Harvards and the Yales and all of that. And he hired a lot of clerks from our school or from a lot of regional schools or local schools. And that was really important to him. I think he always had, in terms of clerks, he had some of the most diverse clerks at that court. So that was a really amazing place to be. And then I moved into a plaintiff side employment discrimination law firm, which of course, that was all we did was, you know, we brought mostly race and gender proposed class actions. So that's, you know, big companies looking at, and it was all disparate impact cases, which means a general policy, if there were any policies that were not, you know, intentional discrimination, but if there were any policies that as a result of those policies or practices had an unequal or differential impact either on race or gender or disability or any of the other protected classes. So there we were immersed in it as our job. I'm not sure how well we practiced what we preached. And again, this is just, it's so hard because it's all about traditional. And if you look at who the partners were, it was a lot of white men. There was one female partner. There were one or two partners of color, but the rest, it was a lot of white men. And it felt like a big gender divide and racial divide of, you know, who the associates were a lot of young white women and some young white men. And then the support staff were a lot of people of color. And it just felt, looking around, like, what is going on here? And then I moved into government, and I was shocked at my first, you know, branch meeting. It looked like this, you know, like, 30 different little tiny little screens. And it was all white women. I mean, not all, but it's about 30 attorneys. And I feel like 25 are white women who left law firms because they have kids. And I mean, that's me. But it just, you know, because government's great to work for the government, work-life balance is great, and you make a decent salary as an attorney. But, and it's just not discussed in what we do. And it's very segmented in government that, you know, there are anti-discrimination laws, there are civil rights laws, there's a whole section of HHS, the Office for Civil Rights, that does great work, and there are attorneys in the Civil Rights Division that do all of that work. But in my job of advising public health programs, it's so segmented that I don't advise on those issues, even though I have background on them because of my firm work. It's just, if there are any, you know, D&I issues or equity issues, that's not the work that I do in terms of my professional stuff. But I try to, the program, one of the programs I advise is the HIV/AIDS Bureau, which is run by fantastic people. It's one of the most diverse staff in terms of race and gender, and it's fabulous. And because of the people that they serve, which is, you know, people at risk or people with HIV/AIDS, they do a great job with intersectionality, social determinants of health. And I think especially with this administration, there's a huge focus on equity. So the actual work we're doing works, and our clients got it right with, like, they're actually talking the talk, and the way the staff looks is, and they're all lived experiences. There's, they've done it. It's not just lip service, but for the attorneys. And again, it's the problem with just this traditionalism in our profession. I feel like we're not really there yet.
Thank you. So before we open it up to Q&A, if anybody has just any general advice to share with Barnard students that are looking to enter your field, what's maybe one piece of advice that you would tell them? We can kind of just go as it comes to you. Feel free to share.
I will offer my all-purpose career advice. And I've said this, I've participated in a bunch of like career panels at Georgetown also. So I think don't underestimate the role of serendipity in your career. I think Barnard women, and this is true of the students who are law students at Georgetown, we tend as a group to be very focused, very driven people who want to achieve and want to do things. And we often have a path that we have mentally put out there. And I think the one thing you've heard from pretty much all of us is none of us really followed the path we set out to do at the beginning. You know, that's how we got where we are now, is not by sheer determination to stay on the path that we mentally had. I started out as a biochem major. I finished up as a poli-sci major and I've spent my whole career as a lawyer. Ironically, now working with a bunch of scientists again, so I guess I've come full circle. But a bunch of my career changes, although there's a distinct thread of public interest in public service and a distinct thread for me of being in-house counsel, I assiduously avoided being a litigator. I've also been open to the serendipity of, well, this is something really different. Let's take it. Let's go see where this path goes. And so having a goal is good, but don't get so wedded to it that you don't stick your head up now and then and look around.
I can go next. I have two, but I'll try to be brief. One is to talk to as many people as possible, talk to as many lawyers as possible. And I hope that our contact information is shared, or at least mine. I don't want to volunteer all the bill as contact information, but if anything that I've done, either past or present, sounds interesting, I really hope that you all contact me and talk to as many lawyers doing as many different kinds of things, just to get a sense, because there's so many different ways to be a lawyer. And my second piece of advice, which comes from that, is think about what kind of work you like to do. And I don't mean subject matter, but I mean, do you like reading? Or does the idea of reading something, spending your entire day reading, make you, roll your eyes? Do you really like talking to people, talking to lots of different kinds of people, talking to, or does that not sound like what you want to do? And don't think of in terms of like what title or the prestige or the pay. And I mean, all of those things matter too, but actually most of your life is what you were just getting up and doing each day. And think about what kind of skills and tasks that you like, that you're good at, that will make you feel happy and fulfilled, because you can have the most important sounding job on paper and it can be everything you work for your whole life. But if you actually don't like the tasks that are involved with that work, you're going to be pretty miserable.
I want to agree with all of that. And also just don't go to law school because you think that's what it sounds good and you're going to make a lot of money. Because you know what, I don't make a lot of money, but I love my job. So, I mean, and law school was hard. It wasn't fun. I actually hated law school. And maybe I'm unique, but the only thing I liked about law school was the criminal law class. I realized I liked it. And then I did the mock trial, and that's what kept me there. And I had, a few friends, but it was competitive at the time because I went to school where there was a curve and someone had actually ripped out a page of the book everyone needed at the St. John's Library. I was studying at Fordham. So it was competitive. So try to be sure about your decision to go to law school when you go, because it's not something to do just because you think it sounds good or you should get a master's because you don't know what else to do, because it's a commitment and it's expensive and it's hard.
I would just kind of amplify and piggyback off what both Maddie and Felice said. So I agree, law school is hard. I actually loved law school and I loved being a lawyer. I love being a lawyer. And you see on Twitter all the time, people giving this advice, like this is the worst job in the world, or everyone's going to be miserable. You don't actually, that's not true. Most of the lawyers I've worked with doing public interest work love their job. And they don't wake up miserable every day. So I just want to kind of put that out there. I agree though, that you should be sure it's what you want. And I say that while also saying the path could be really windy, and that's okay. I think sometimes when you go to a panel and people tell their story, they tell their story with threads, and you can kind of say, oh, like this is how they ended up where they ended up. That's not how I experienced it. I think that's not how most people do. It's okay not to be sure. It's okay to try different things out. It's okay not to have a thread, especially when you're in college. Like, take time, think about it. And this goes into my last piece of advice, which is get as much practical work experience as you can. Do internships, work with clients, not only talking to lawyers, but like see what they're doing day by day. If it's right for you, if then I would also say, and if it's right for you, take time off before going to law school, work for a year or two, know what that's like. Kind of see if you can get experience with clients that way too, so that when you do walk into school and you're looking for your first internship or you're looking for your first job, you have something to put on your resume and you know why you're there.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys so much. All great advice, all hopefully very important, informative information that you feel like maybe for everyone filled in the blanks, answered some questions. But for anything that wasn't covered that any students would like to ask, you can feel free to unmute yourself, or you can also, as Urella said, put it in the chat and I'll just read it out loud for our panelists to hear. So we'll take a couple moments.
Thank you all so much. It was very informative. I am a junior right now, so I have a little bit of time, but I do know that I'd like to take a few years off before deciding whether law school would be the right path. And I am just wondering what I've thought about, like jobs right out of college. I've thought about jobs in the paralegal legal assistant world. And I am just wondering if there are some organizations or departments in New York that you would recommend looking at and looking into for first jobs out of college in the legal world.
I could take that one first, if that's okay. So first, I would say don't wed yourself to the legal world. Even if you intend to go to law school, you can learn a lot doing a lot of different things. And the legal world is pretty expansive too. So working in an NGO, working abroad, there are so many different ways that you get exposure that could fit into going to law school. I worked for 4 years as a case handling paralegal at the Legal Aid Society. I worked in the Civil Practices Law Reform Unit. So it was a unit that brought civil rights and class action litigation. I think one of the wonderful things that the Legal Aid Society or other legal services providers, and there are a ton of them everywhere, is that you get a lot of actually hands-on experience. So in addition of supporting kind of the class action and litigation work that we did, I also was able to sit on coalitions, do policy work, and I represented individual clients in administrative hearings before administrative law judges and in other kind of advocacy and appeals when folks with disabilities needed accommodations, and a particular agency wasn't giving it to them. And so for me, I got a ton of kind of hands-on experience, which was wonderful. And so I think if that's what you're looking for, I think that any of those organizations are in New York City or kind of more field are always hiring. But again, I think it's wonderful. It was amazing. And it set me up so well. And there are so many different places that can set you up well too. You can look very wide, you can look broadly and widely, and any of those will help you succeed later on.
Unfortunately, I don't think I have good response specifically to your question, Bella. I will say I did exactly what Felice just told everybody not to do, which was, let's see, I had a degree in political science. I knew I didn't really want to get a job right out of law school. I did well on the LSAT, so I went to law school, which, while it worked out for me, I also realized, like halfway into my career, I had a little period of unemployment that, looking back, there was a really bad reason to go to law school. And I didn't like law school at all, actually. I didn't enjoy law school as an academic experience. I just think I lucked out that it turns out I'm a good lawyer and I have actually enjoyed my career. I bucked against the fancy pants law school to big law firm pipeline, which is, I think, the main reason I've actually enjoyed being a lawyer, was I swam against the stream. But yeah, I would just say, I don't know where you should go work, but definitely I think my friends who took time off and had a job somewhere, whether it was just in an organization they wanted to work for, or just taking a little more time to be in the work world, and thought about why they wanted to go to law school and what they might want to do. They all they enjoyed law school more, and I think had less angst during law school about where they were going to end up.
I mean, there are tons of places in the city that hire paralegals, whether, I mean, I would try, and maybe if you wanted to go the paralegal route, I think you can even get a paralegal certificate pretty easily, which makes you more marketable. You know, there's some like really, you know, nice big firms that would even, you could be a paralegal there and see how that works. Or if you wanted to see, you know, the criminal world, I think even the Port Authority hires paralegals. They have a pretty big legal practice there, where you do like Article 78, stuff like that. And then all of the public defenders always have paralegals, and I know a lot of them often will be studying for the LSAT, or, you know, going to school at night. So if you just look up all those agencies, which I'm sure Barnard could connect you with, you'll see there are a lot of different opportunities. If you were going to go the paralegal route, I would try to look at a field you're interested in, you think you might be, because then you'll know if you like it or not.
Great. Any other questions? All right, so if we don't have any more questions, thank you all so much. As a reminder, Beyond Barnard has other related events coming up. Next Friday, I'm doing a mentor in residence with the Deputy Assistant at the U.S. Department of, let me get the exact title for you. She's the Deputy Assistant General Counsel at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. So definitely take a look. It's under the event section on Handshake. And then we're also doing Career Skills Week coming up. So any career skills, resumes, cover letters, networking, all under the event section on Handshake. And you'll also be in touch with you all, especially for any contact information the panelists would like to share. And special thanks to our panelists. All this advice was really great, and hopefully, you know, provided our students with a lot to think about now moving forward. So thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Good luck to
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.